Yeah, the buck stops for me. It's been a trend, I suppose, for a while, but I think it's probably as prevalent now as ever, and that's damaging small forwards, or medium-sized forwards. Not just crumbing small forwards, but guys that can hurt you in the air as well. And we're seeing a batch of them in this season, that their sides are getting their tall forwards up the ground a little bit when they can, and going over the top to these players. So Jamie Elliott's been excellent. He's kicked 23 goals, which puts him seventh on the Common. He had a quieter weekend, but still was playing that role. But we saw Nick Watson early was put deep and isolated a little, and was hitting the scoreboard early for Hawthorn. Ben Long for the Suns. Riley West, who I reckon never really he doesn't get the field set up for him to be a target player, but he just imposes himself because he can nullify a 6'4" intercept marker and bring the ball to ground, or he can move him out and take the mark. And his performance was huge. Higgins is second on the Common. He's probably more your quintessential crummer, but his body work, he is a bit of a he just finds opportunities when others won't. But it's probably more the Elliott, Long, West, Watson, Curtis before he went out. Dempsey's doing it off a wing. Like, he's kicked 17 goals off a wing. So I think these players, and it's not your Heeneys, Zerhas, Haywards, who I think are more aerial players first. These are guys that were more ground players to begin with. They're 5'7", 8, 9ers that are just causing havoc and have become as prevalent in forward 50 targets as the tall players that we've come to love and expect to be in that role. So just watch this space, because I think if you don't have one, you're behind the 8 ball.
They are a great batch, and you raise them at the perfect time. So Elliott's match-turning feats. Long's probably been the best of that group so far this season. But West he seems to do maximum damage from minimal opportunity. Maybe on that equation, he might be the most damaging player from minimum chips in the comp.
Well, there's not. I agree with you, but there's not really minimum chips at the moment because they're getting so many inside 50s. But I love the way he goes about it. It's like he's like, if Leber is their spirit animal, well, then he's the heart and soul. It's like I just love the fact that he would have loved to have been a midfielder. He wanted to be in the midfield. He hasn't played 70 games yet. So he's lightly raced, but he does the job so well. I loved his game on Saturday night, and I love the buy-in that Bevo was able to get from blokes like him. And it shows real character of the individual to be able to say, okay, this is my lot, this is my opportunity, and not only will I accept it, but I want to be the best I possibly can be at it, and he's definitely done that.
All right, the buck stops that player in your forward line. Looking for a career that gives you more? Search Police Careers, Victoria Police, made for more. I felt like the big issue, it was the game you were on, so we're in the sweet spot with you. The big issue was what happened on Saturday night. Just the tour de force that the Bulldogs were, and the spin-off, what that means for Essendon. How did you take Saturday night in? Because it was a bit of a happening.
It was, and I always lean towards seeing the positive especially in this role, and I thought the Dogs were amazing, and they have been for the best part of the season. I thought their performances have been really consistent, even when they've lost. I think they've played really exciting football. They've been really strong over the contest. They just might have been beaten over the course of 4 quarters, but they outclassed Essendon, and they outworked Essendon. And I thought that I thought their game was there for all to see. It was really strong inside and really clean inside. They turned into, as I said in the call, I thought they became the Harlem Globetrotters at certain points to the Essendon's Washington Generals, because they just couldn't miss a target. There was 2 handballs they missed that's led to an Essendon goal late in the game, and that stood out because it was pretty much one of the few handball targets that were missed. They put each other in time and space. They run in waves. They outworked, as I said, they outworked Essendon. I thought they're so clear in what their roles are and what they're trying to achieve that their efficiency and work rate was through the roof. There's no wasted energy. There's no wasted running. There's no wasted thought or emotion about this, that, or the other. They were just absolutely in sync, and Essendon were the victims of in my mind, a really strong performance. So I actually see the positive for the Bulldogs before I see the negative for the Bombers, despite a 90-point differential. I thought the Bombers tried to play the game the right way. I thought they tried to impose their game style. I just thought they were outclassed.
So how far-reaching for the Dogs where they are right now? So they're fifth. They're 6-4. They've given themselves the best platform they've had in years to attack. I think they've now insulated themselves from the who's missing debate, where a lot of teams are defined by the who's missing debate. It doesn't matter who they're missing.
No.
Now, so this is the sweet spot that I imagine you all search for.
The only concern is it's round 10.
Yeah.
You know, like if they were playing this football, and we need to see it against the Collingwood or against the Hawthorn or a Brisbane or even a Gold Coast Suns. We need to see that like over a couple of those opponents at the pointy end, obviously, to be able to absolutely get that last couple of percent. But we don't need to see that to know that it's going to stack up in some shape or form. Like their front six going in would have had, if you nominally put their best forward line together, it would have had Darcy, it would have had Ugle-Hagan, and it would have had Waitman. It might have even had a Treloar there who out of their burgeoning midfield would have had to spat forward at times. So you've got 3 or 4 first choice front six players that aren't there. And Norton would have been there already. So you replace Darcy with, I don't know, Karmas. You replace Ugle-Hagan with Davidson on the weekend, who's running around like a third tall forward and like just did it with aplomb, like asked to play a different role and does it with aplomb. Now, I don't know who's replacing Waitman. West would have been there anyway, I would have thought, but he's definitely got more responsibility and they just get it done. They're the best team at moving the ball from their D50 to inside 50 unimpeded, and clearly the best side. And there's a few little strategies they use with their high forwards who are frustrated midfielders, but they're including them in different aspects of the game, which allows them to get the ball in their hands. They just had so much of the ball and used it so well. They were really good.
They scored 127, 113, 131, 96 and 127 from the moment they lost Sam Darcy in the early stages of that St Kilda game. Is pretty remarkable. So on the Essendon side of the equation, what did you feel?
Well, I thought that, I thought they started the game okay. Both teams were moving the ball really well, end to end. But then the Dogs were able to connect, and then the scoreboard got away from them. It's like 4 or 5 goals really quickly. The double goal hurt the Vandermeer. That hurts the Bombers. It's just, you don't need that. It would have been good if it happened down the other end for them, but it didn't. So they got out to 5 or 6 goals really quickly. And I noticed that Brad Scott said in his post-match that we didn't look to stem the tide at all. We were happy just to play the game. And I believe that's true in some sense. I thought the first half they did try to continue to attack, but they just weren't able to put any real pressure on Western Bulldogs from the inside to the outside. And once they got it outside, they were too good. I did think that they tried to chip it around and control the ball a little bit more after half time. And that just wasn't effective because the Dogs were that efficient in their midfield defence. But look, if you look at what the Bulldogs have done with the playing group that they've done it with, they're making more than the sum of their parts. I think at the moment Essendon have just got the sum of their parts. It's not more than. So what is that special sauce? I'm not sure what it is. Do you slate it back to the coach? Maybe. Is it back to a little bit of maturity? Well, you can't win that argument because some of the Dogs' young players that really performed are immature in their AFL, in an AFL sense. So yeah, there's it shows that Essendon are better than the bottom six, and they're a long way off the top six. So that's probably where they're at.
Yep, and they know it.
Yeah,
Couldn't have said it more clearly. And what that win might mean for them Bucks.
I know what you're saying about the last quarter, but I thought that the first three quarters were pretty good as well. Like both teams sort of made some mistakes by foot when that looked like they were out and clear. But Melbourne, I loved their pluck. I loved their fight. It looked like Brisbane could put a gap in a game that was going to be hard to come back from. And I thought 2 or 3 times Melbourne did come back when it looked like if Brisbane had kicked another one, it might have broken the back of the resistance. But Melbourne's footy was good. You know, they went at about 24% for D50, about 1 in 4 that went from D50 to inside 50, which is above average, and that's something they've really struggled with. They didn't give any turnovers away in their back half. Like Brisbane had 9 for the game, which is well under. Yeah, it's less than half of the average. So Brisbane weren't able to turn the ball over in their front half and go back and score from it. They relied on scoring from a back half game, which they did extremely well for 3 quarters. And then when Melbourne closed that down and they were able to turn the ball over in the front half themselves, they had 12 front half turnovers in the last quarter alone.
Yep.
And they went back and scored 3 goals, 3-3 from those. And they maintained their own, when it got in their back 50, Melbourne maintained that, a little bit better than that 24% to get it back in that zone. The matchups were great. Oliver on Neil was a really interesting battle. The goal that Oliver kicked late was, instructive, and he didn't look over the top energetic. Like he was quite focused, quite narrowed in his focus, in his intensity. But that was an interesting battle. There was a bit of niggle there, and I just thought that they just kept playing the way they wanted to play. When you've got Gawn, when you've got Petrarca, like they've got some real talented players in that side. They've got some young guys that are coming through that I think that look good. Lindsay looks good. Windsor was quiet, and McVee I think is a real good player. Bowie's had an excellent year, so they are coming along slowly, and they haven't had their full choice as well. Jake Lever's a big part of their best football, and that'll come back with time. They've got a couple of tough nuts in Rivers and Sparrow that just stood up and did extremely well. And I haven't even mentioned Melksham and Andrews, which was a great matchup. And Melksham, he's a bloke that they miss so much when he's not there. You talk about their forward connection. They miss him when he's not there, and you understand why when he is.
The coaching around Fritsch, so he dropped him once and then had to bring him back through injury. He could have been dropped again, and he was terrible in the Hawthorn game. Use him as sub, and he actually does get the spark. And Fritsch, for the first time this year, spark and gave them something in that last quarter, and he was a big part of it. So the push. So there's a lot of, I imagine, you're pushing and prodding. What's going to work? And then you get this moment where that's worked, and what might you be able to turn that into?
Yeah, well, I think the fact that Bailey Fritsch had a smile on his face as well. Like obviously he's involved in a team win, but there might be an element of taking the pressure off the individual as well. Like he clearly hasn't thrived through the first part of this season, and when you aren't playing well, you can tip on yourself as much as others will tip on you. So you can beat yourself before you've even gone out. So there might be a bit of a psychological release for him, and the dropping him didn't work. And he might go through, and depending on availability, etc., the next 3 or 4 weeks, it might be a really good place for him to go and play his footy, because he's not a young player. He's got a training age, so he's had pre-seasons under the belt. You could do work through the week and still go and play, anywhere between a quarter and 3 quarters every weekend, and still be up for grabs, or up and ready to go. So, look, I think that it seems like the coaching staff and Goodwin have been able to pull the right triggers at the right time. They've clearly been trying to shift, and this was the best example of what they're trying to shift to. because they did try and they were trying to shift the angles. They were trying to. There was more trigger hands than we've seen before. So players are turning up for an uncontested mark and then breaking the lines, and we were seeing the shift the lines, but we weren't seeing the trigger hands. So they're definitely moving forward gradually. But as Simon Goodwin said, we've got greater challenges ahead of us, and we've got to keep going to work, and that's a great attitude to have. But when you get this feedback, this positive feedback about a win against an opponent who is rated on their home track, then that's validation for what you're doing, which could be, the boost that takes them to another level again. So that'll be really interesting. I'm not sure who they've got in their next couple of weeks, but it's an opportunity for them to really have a crack at it. Sydney next week on the MCG. St Kilda up at Alice Springs after that. Collingwood at the MCG for the King's birthday. So there's a couple of cracking matches before they have to look too much further. So we'll get a test of what their football looks like in 25 in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
And for the Lions, so Chris Fagan spoke about the difference in hunger in the last quarter as Melbourne's season was on the line. Lee Matthews used to say that premiership hangovers don't come at the start of the year. It's in the grind. That'd be an interesting... So they've had big leads 2 weeks running, cough one up for a draw, cough one up for a loss. I would think there's a bit of ammunition for Fags in that.
Oh, yeah, well, there always is. Like we talk about, you're always learning. It's just the points and the learnings, or just the learnings. But I think that is an intangible that makes the difference in close games and against. Well, there's obviously mechanics in the close game as well to get the structures right, but that grunt and that will to win and the desperation that comes, that can ebb and flow. It's really hard to go back to the well week after week after week. And when you've had success, and I thought Brisbane was scoring heavily off the back half, and it sort of gets to the point where we'll just keep doing this. We'll just keep moving the ball. We've kicked 4 from behind centre from turnover in the first 3 quarters. So we'll just keep doing this. So you don't think that this is going to be a tough match. This is going to go down the trenches. It's been an open game, and you've been able to move the ball at will. So it's common sense to think that you're going to roll into the first 10 minutes of the last quarter and be able to do the same. But then when you don't, you need to flick a switch. They weren't able to flick it quick enough, and Melbourne imposed. They had foot on throat, and they imposed it. It is a heads up. And you don't need long in this game to work out that if you get ahead of yourself, you'll get your ass kicked. That game and the anatomy of it looked not dissimilar to the early stages of the season for Carlton. Lead Richmond, get run over in the second half. Lead Hawthorn, get run over in the second half. Lead the Bulldogs, get run over in the second half. So and Collingwood is play really well against Collingwood, lead Collingwood and get run over in the second half. They look like they'd completely lost their dare, or they didn't have any answers in the last quarter. So that all credit to Sydney, and the second halves of Heeney and Warner were exceptional. 43 touches between them for 2 goals, for 6 shots and 6 shots on goal, 2 goals for. If Heeney had a kick straight, it would have been an amazing night. But they didn't have the answers. I thought taking Boyd off Blakey and putting him to halfback was designed, I think, to create a bit of run, because they were struggling to find that, to break the lines and to be able to get through that first line of pressure. But it opened up the other way, and Blakey was involved in a couple of goals early in that last quarter that were instructive and were enough to break the resistance. But Carlton have got if they are a dour side, they defend well. I think they're about 4th best for aggregate against, so they're defending well and they're hard to score against. But you can get so dour that you get stuck in your own mire, and I think that's where they are at the moment. You've got to give to get, and I think the best sides are still got a fairly good balance between offense and defense. They don't commit too much to one or the other. Yeah, and I still do believe that your best offense comes off really good defense. But, yeah, that Carlton weren't able to execute that when it mattered in the back half of the game.
And the long tail that they have, and you forecast this coming into the season, you drew the attention to it. They have a long tail like a poor touring cricket side at the moment. Is when you sit down to do that, and then when you watch it, there's a few who are just operating on starvation rations, like a critical mass.
Yeah, and it's starting to get there a little bit. I mean, I think it's as much their talented players drop away too much, and then So say we've spoken about the Bulldogs, and I'll just use this just to get back to this point. But if your best players are playing well, then your role players and your young players who are less experienced, they can come in and they can, off the back of your best players playing well, your game gets set up, and then you can just go and execute your role. If your best players aren't playing well, so if they go from an 8 out of 10 to a 3 out of 10, if their best players aren't playing well, then what do you do as a young bloke? What do you do as a role player? As a player who's still working out what the game is asking for, when the skeleton the skeleton of your game plan falls apart, and that's what it looks like at Carlton for me. I thought they had a real crack on the weekend. But my concern over the time with Carlton is that when their best falls away, then their youth and their role players find it hard to know exactly where to leverage off, because the game plan hasn't got, the base isn't as solid as we see in the good performing teams at the moment. So there's a few questions to answer there, like how much of their defence do they give away to start being a little bit more attacking? How do they get that? I like the two Hollands brothers. I think they can play. Sard's had a really good year. Hasn't lost many defensive contests, but not getting quite as much run off him as we'd like. Sam Walsh looks a little bit stuck. So it's a real challenge for them. But we are coming into winter, and it'll go down that path where it's contested ball territory, grind. That might feed into Carlton's, what the best of Carlton's footy is at the moment. So, yeah, these games, the next 4 to 6 weeks, set up a season.
Experience keyhole laser vision surgery at New Vision Clinics. Call 1-800-20-20-20. I think the best bit was the Heeney game, wasn't it? Because this is how he played last year, and we haven't seen so far this season. But that was just a one man imposing himself on a game.
Oh, look, it was huge. And you talk about attributes in the game, like he can win the ball in the air. He's as clean as, I thought he was just so clean. That was a slippery game. There were players slipping over on that far left hand sort of forward pocket. Was there a stage there or something?
Yep. It's usually the pitch that's the worry at the SCG. It's the outfield now. It really is not. It's only just fit for play at the moment.
Well,
especially a really bad place to get to.
That 25 by 25 metre sort of position out there, you'd want to know about that, because if you're a defender, you lose your feet, that's a goal. So if your player's on his feet, I thought Heeney just showed, he looked like, when everyone else was ice skating, he looked like he was on firm ground, clean with his hands, can handle the ball in tight. Really, really sharp with his decision making. The only thing, and he was kicking himself about it, was being able to kick straight. We've had 7 shots on goal plus, like if he could add 38 and 6, imagine what sort of game that would have looked like. And but that's pretty much the game he had without the finishing. So no, he was exceptional, and his sidekick in Warner was excellent as well.
So the credentials of both sides went on test here. Nathan Buckley, what did you decipher?
Well, they had 4 of the top 5 ranked players on the field, the Crows: Saligo, Dawson, O'Brien and Rankin, with Jeremy Howe the only Collingwood player that split them. But it's not about individuals. I think a PFI test isn't about how good your individuals are. It's about how good they come together as a team. And I think he's right. He's definitely right. Like when he says we're better than that, that's aspirational. when he says we can't be satisfied with getting close and being a kick away here or there, that is absolutely true. That's an attitude that Adelaide need to take because they have all the elements. There is nothing stopping them from being one of the very best teams in the competition, other than that intangible belief, that intangible investment when it matters most, and a couple of key contests here or there when the game is on the line. I thought everyone's gone to the sort of tall forward selection. I'm not that concerned about that. It's worked really well for them. It will work for them again. When they go into winter, they'll have to work out a little bit as the game slows. Sometimes your tools help you. They help you go long down the line and then speed up from that when you can't move the ball off the line as much. So they will work that up as they go. But I don't think that was a massive aspect in the game personally. The biggest part for me is Collingwood, and we all see them as this. When you've got Elliott and Hill and McCreery in front of the ball, and you've got sort of say Hoskin Elliott who's running on the outside, and they can go end to end and score a goal in a heartbeat. That's about 5% of what Collingwood does. 95% of it is to put teams to sleep. They're the best defensive side by a mile. They've 10 goals better than their next best, so they're a goal a week better than the next best defence. The way I saw the game on the weekend, it's like brothers fighting, in the lounge room. Collingwood are the big brother and Adelaide are the little brother, and the big brother's got the little brother in a headlock and then lets him go for 10 seconds and smacks him around the head for a bit and then puts him back in a headlock. That's how Collingwood play their footy. They put you in a headlock and then they let the shackles go and they'll score really quickly, and they might score 2 or 3 or 4 goals in 10 minutes and then they'll put you back in the headlock again. And that is experience. But it is part of the game plan, and it keeps it in the clinches where they are really confident. They haven't got, like, Jeremy Howe had a really good game, but Frampton's not an All-Australian defender, but he's doing the job really well. They just make sure the game is set up the way that it works for them. They don't want an open game; they want an in-tight game. And then when it gets out in the open, it's on their terms at their time, and they set the game up that way. They're a boa constrictor that lets you go every now and then. You think you're okay, but you actually get whacked in the face, and then you get constricted again. Yeah. So that's the way Collingwood play, and you need to be able to beat them in the trenches to be able to get over the top of them. So it is a PFI test. It's only one, and Adelaide were almost there, but almost as Matty Nix just said, isn't going to be enough for them. So there's still work to do.
Yeah, they had their lament of the third quarter when they missed the sequence of chances, Curtin, and then Rankin twice kicked it out on the full, which was weird.
Yep.
They got stiffed right at the end of the third quarter when Miller had got called for a throw that was a clear handball, which is a huge problem given the throws that had been allowed to go in that game. And the Crow throw was in operation at various stages. Then to pick out one that was a legitimate handball was terrible, and then that led to the last goal. But the truth of the last quarter was they were never beating Collingwood for all the reasons you just outlined. They were never beating them in the last quarter.
Well, in the end, you won't have all the umpiring decisions go your way. You won't. You will miss some shots, and they can be the difference. Like if Rankin kicks those two, then it's. I mean, really, you look at the margin and. That's the difference. That is the difference. Exactly the difference. But you're not going to get everything right, but you've got to get enough right. And they just didn't get enough right. And Collingwood did.
Yeah. And you referenced Jeremy Howe, which is spot on. It's from the moment Reef McGuinness went down in that Bulldogs game and Howe had to return to his old role, I think he's been superb. This is my point with Collingwood is, yes, they might be old, but they don't play old. They don't look old. They don't have players who are on the precipice about to tip over. Sidebottom's resurgence, Pendlebury's enduring. And I reckon Howe's has been as characteristic of as anybody. I reckon he's had a brilliant year.
I agree. And my personal belief is that the great players, and I think Howie has been a consistently great player for a long time now. You need to reinvent yourself. We're not going to see him sit on shoulders again. Like, that's not going to happen. So he's had injuries. He's been physically put through the ringer in the last 3 or 4 years, and he won't be the player that he's not the player that we once knew, but he's still finding a way. And so he's had to adapt his game and develop what he can bring to the table, improve other areas and buffer others, and he's done that. And it's a will to compete. It's a will to contribute to the team. And there's a hunger still there. So, I mean, obviously I've got a really strong connection with Howie. Haven't spoken to him for 5 or 6 weeks, but he's I love his competitiveness. I love that, this shows more of his character than anything, because he's lost the athleticism that many thought that, was him. But he doesn't need that, because there's more to him than just that.
What the hell's going on with the Giants?
Well, the same thing that's been happening the whole year. They're just giving too much supply to their opposition. So if they hadn't, or they got up that outside of that Geelong win, so there's 3 losses that side of it, and then a loss to Fremantle at home this side of it. Just looking at those inside 50s against, Western Bulldogs are the best in the comp, 46 on average. Carlton and X, 47. Suns at 48. Collingwood are 5th at 49, Brisbane 49. So they're manageable numbers. That means you're playing the game in front half, you're winning enough clearance, you're moving the ball well enough out there, you're not putting your back 6 under too much stress. The 18th is West Coast at 59.2. 17th is the Giants, 57.6. On average, 57 entries a game against. And I don't care how good your back 6 is. You're not winning. You're not winning any more than 50% of your games. If you're giving up an average of 57 inside 50s every week, something's broke. It might be clearances. I don't think so. It's just their team D. They cannot slow the opposition down. And on turn, I think their forwards, they keep their forwards long, and that's a bit of a trend across the competition. But outside of the 2 high forwards, and Daniels has been out for a while, but so Jones, Thomas, or the players that are in those roles, those 2 can go. But if your deepest 4 forwards aren't doing any defending, well, then that's probably what you get. If it's a deliberate tactic, it's not working, and something needs to shift, because you just can't manage with that much supply against.
And the debate, which I don't think is a debate, is Luke Jackson played as the lone ruckman and dominated.
Yeah. One thing I would say, it's not the coach's job to make sure that list management has done its job. Once that you have the list, that's great. You have a list, and players get paid as they get paid, and they're available. But you have a blank canvas of 18 or 22 roles and a sub that needs to be filled every week to execute the game style that you want to play. It doesn't matter whether a high-paid player is sitting in the VFL. It's not your problem that a high-paid player is sitting in the VFL if he doesn't allow your team and your unit to play its best football. That's not Justin Longmuir's job. Justin Longmuir's job is to put their best team out on the park. So if he feels, if I was talking to him now, don't feel pressure to play Sean Darcy if it's not going to bring your best footy to light. And I think sometimes as a coach, you can get caught defending the list management at times, even in post-match presses, and trying to, buffer against, we want to go with the 2 rucks, because he might have actually had a say in that from a list management perspective. But in the end, don't make 2 mistakes. If you've made a mistake at the first Port, then make a better decision in the next one, and then move on from there.
Port are in our next conversation. Mentioning Port, that'll be coming up. They're a bit of an unanswerable question, although maybe we know. Maybe we know exactly what's going on there. It might be a more rhetorical question with Port Adelaide. They've lost all 10 last quarters. They have a much shorter breaking point than at any time during Ken Hinkley's coaching tenure there, and they look like a club marking time.
We talk about the long tail of Carlton. At the moment, Port have got a long tail. So their best is really good. I mean, Rosie looks like he's playing as well as he ever has. Butters is always going to get the primary attention from the opposition. I love Powell Pepper in front of the ball. Wines is as courageous and as honest as they come, as is Willem Drew. But there's just so many young players there, or not quites, that, and I think Kenny has done a really good job over his tenure at cobbling together teams that might have quite a few not quites in it. So their situation at the moment, I think they've always sort of been a side that, they've been a consistent top four side ahead of what he's got to play with, in my opinion. So maybe this is, and I don't think I wouldn't look to elements of coaching change or anything like that. It's just that they probably have been a side that has that is focused on and relied on emotion to find their very best. We see those backs against the wall performances that they throw out, but they were bested by a side that, it was just faster, slicker, and more persistent. And in the end, when the damn wall broke, geez, it broke, didn't it?
Yep.
And it was over real quick.
And that's the marker of Port Adelaide's year, is that in a way that hasn't happened previously. They got that right. I don't want this to be trite, because what West Coast did with the raw emotion we heard from Andrew McQualter at the start of the program was pretty amazing. And you probably have to live it inside to know how they were able to navigate that. But I would guess that sort of emotion can either crush you or lift you, and they were able to lift as a result of the circumstances that they were presented with, harrowing that they were.
Yeah, and that was amazing for them to get their first win of the year and to be able to handle that. And I thought Oscar Allen, as traumatic as his season has been and sort of up and down from a professional perspective, it pales in significance to real life issues. And I feel great for Andrew McQualter. I think he's worn his heart in his sleeve the last couple of weeks. You saw how close they got to Richmond, and they possibly should have won that game, but. To be able to deal with, and they've got a lot of young players in there as well, to be able to deal with that sort of emotion and that sort of stress and upset, to be able to focus on what they needed to do in the game, because it is just a game. It would have been enormously satisfying for them to get that payback. With the backdrop of it, really, it's just a game.
Yep. They got that right. Smarter Light. Good for you. Good for the planet. Smarter Light environmental exit signs. I'm going to hijack Buckley's chance this week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a chance that you might coach Tasmania?
Oh, there's a chance. Yeah, I think obviously this has come back around with Brendan's comments, and we met a couple of times last year. The initial one was from him, and then the second one was from me to understand the challenge that the Devils face, and how they were going to build that club, and to put my 2 cents in, I suppose, and then to learn as much as I possibly could about it. There's a couple of really good football people that I believe would go really well down there, and I probably put their names forward and put them in front of Brendan as well. So I think they've been exceptional the way that they've the slow build that they've done, and I think they've got the order right. You've got to get the list management, the recruiting right first. The academies will come, and then probably you get the whatever you get from the draft and trade conditions, and then put your coaching group in place later.
So, is part of yours an introspective piece? Am I open to coaching again? Have you answered that question in your own mind?
Yeah, I'm still asking myself that question.
Okay.
Look, I think that it's still there. That coaching bug is still there. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. But I mean, an existing club versus the Devils, they're two very different propositions. So to understand more of the Devils is to understand whether you think it fits and whether you're energised by it. That challenge is something so different to what I'd experienced. But it's fundamental. It's what footy is all about, and it's just helping young men find their way through their early stages of their career. And there's going to be a lot of those. And then picking senior players to come in and off-field staff that have experience, that are passionate and want to grow something from the ground up. A very different challenge, and one that I'm still exploring.
Yeah, something that is clearly invigorating. The idea of it is invigorating. We're just watching you. The idea is invigorating.
Yeah, absolutely. And you asked the question. I suppose if you go back into coaching, you want to win a flag, and that may or may not happen with the Devils in their first 4 or 5 years. It's you probably the pragmatic version would be no, that won't happen. You're setting it up to leave a legacy for generations down the track or for the next iteration of coaching groups. So I understand that as well. So that's all part of it.
That's all rather thrilling. We'll think about that. Got a bit of a crisis in my seedings. What would you like to do with yours, Nathan Buckley?
Well, I only had the Dogs out because I wanted to get Hawthorn and the Suns in for a play-out game.
That's right.
So they went to 3 and 4, and the Geelong and the Dogs went out. Otherwise, I would have had the same seedings 3 weeks in a row. So I shook it up last week, and now I've got to get back. So I've still got Collingwood at 1. Actually, no, I'll go from the bottom. And I've lost the suspense now. But at 4, the Suns stay in because they won that game, and they're doing enough right. But they can't be in front of the third-seeded Brisbane because Brisbane smacked them 3 weeks ago. So they've still got a little bit to go, but they're right up there. The Bulldogs are the ones that come back in for me at 2, and Collingwood are at 1. So, and I'm really comfortable with that. Geelong, I really like. They only went out last week to fit in the play-out game.
Yes.
But they haven't been able to get back in. I think the Dogs deserve to get in there before Geelong does.
So I had the play-in game, which was Gold Coast and Hawthorn.
And who are you putting in?
Well, the only way to put Gold Coast in is to knock Geelong out. But I watched that second half against Port, and I'm not sure with a straight face I can do that. Plus, I want a seeded game on Thursday night.
It's just a matter of
I'm breaking
what
my
level
own
of
rule.
integrity.
I'm breaking my rule because
you?
they're my rules.
Are they?
I can be as flexible as I like. I've got Geelong at 4, Brisbane at 3, and then I'm having overreaction Monday.
Right.
I'm going to have Collingwood at 2, even though they're the rightful 1 seed, and I'm putting the Dogs at 1, heading to Thursday night.
You are one of the most measured media performers in this industry, and you're doing that?
Yeah, I just want to be hot-blooded today. It's my turn to have a snap judgment.
They're your seedings.
They are. I'm putting the Bulldogs at 1, heading to Thursday night.
How good is that game going to be?
It's so good. With never mind the theatre and the pantomime and all, but it's just stacked.
It is, and they're very similar in terms of youth that are coming in and playing with dare and dash.
Yeah.
Love it.